Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Reader's Paradise. Say, if you love hearing the literature that's being performed for you and the stories that are being read to you along with the author interviews, take a moment to give us a 5-star rating and also please leave a comment. The comments help others find this podcast. So, with that being said, I want everybody to take a deep breath because we have something really, really unique today. Today's author is Dre Till. He is the author of a book called The Blood-Dimmed Tide is Loosed. Now, I know that's a tongue twister of a title, but Dre has a wonderful explanation for it. Dre is a Chicago author. He has a degree in criminal justice. And Dre, with that introduction, please tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Well, hello. Yes, my name is actually Andre Tillery. I write under the pen name Dre Till, which is, of course, an abbreviation of my name. And I'm just happy and humbled to be on the show. Thanks for having me, Earl. But I am currently a Chicago police officer. I've been a Chicago police officer for now almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years in September. And I've just had a passion or maybe a calling, for writing. Mm-hmm. And I never really took it seriously. I kept, pushing it away and, I would write certain things and then I would kind of change my mind and, start on something else. And everyone kept telling me that I was pretty good at storytelling. So maybe I should just go ahead and, give it a shot, take it seriously once. And that's what I did.
You know, what I call that is being pregnant with a book. So for women who says, men, you don't know what pregnancy is. Well, we may not know what that type of pregnancy is, but I have been pregnant 26 times. And let me tell you, giving birth to each one of those novels was not easy. And some of my novels didn't have just one child. There were twins and triplets.
That is wonderful.
And all of that in there. So Dre, to give people a sense of your work, because you have written, again, this novel that is an edge-of-your-seat page-turner. It is a thriller, and I know from what I've read, I started looking at people differently. Because I had to start saying, and it made me more aware in ways that I didn't know I wanted to be or needed to be more aware. But it's really interesting. But I'm going to back up a little bit, and I want you to give me a little sense of this tongue-twisting title. How did you come up with it?
Well, that's an interesting story. Actually, when I started writing the book, coincidentally, because I was trying to get my oldest daughter, get her attention, because she never had a fondness for reading. The only thing she was ever interested in was watching horror movies. So I had to try to do something that would capture her attention and give her something that she may want to read. So when I started writing this book, some of the characters I was developing and some of the situations that I was, coming up with, I needed something that was just really calling out to me. And I kept coming up with so many different names. And for some reason, this poem kept coming back to me. Now, by no stretch of the word am I a poet or, do I read just endless amounts of poetry or anything, but this one poem I had always remembered. It was called The Second Coming. It's by Yeats. And it talks about the breakdown of innocence. It talks about the breakdown of society and how the blood-dimmed tide has been loosed upon the world. And it just kept calling out to me. It just resonated right with me. So that's where the title came from. So a lot of people are like, what? I don't understand that, but it was just one of those things. It had to be that title.
It had to be that title. Okay. All right. So that's where that came from. Now I'm going to ask you a writer's question, and because this is suspense, thriller, mystery, and the story opens up, and we're looking at the trash collector. And
Mhm.
you really don't, or at least I think most people in society really don't pay much attention to the trash collector.
Mhm.
And you have created a trash collector that is very unique. So, without giving away too much of the story, walk us through, how you introduce the readers to your characters.
Well, I start by, it actually starts out with our antagonist, the trash collector. And it's just giving us a little bit of background on who he is and, the kind of life that he's living and all the things that's kind of molded him to be the kind of person that he turns out to be. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you before, but it's like I've been I think all of us are on some type of spiritual journey throughout our lives.
Hmm.
And so with that being said, there's good and there's evil out here. And that's all within all of us. And so I'm just pretty much setting the framework for what happens in some people's lives to turn them into good people or bad people. And I just kind of just set the framework to introduce this guy to you and, show some of the things that turned him into the person that he is.
Turned him into the person that he is. And so, in other
Hmm.
words, his history is coming up and influencing his present circumstances or situations. Uh,
Absolutely.
now, the overall arc of the story, you've created a very complex and engaging story. And so, you just talked about, the character. So is there a sense that you can give us as to where the overall story idea came from? You mentioned that there's good and evil in the world, and most of us like to think of only the good things, but you're right, there is a different side of society. There is a darker side of society that a lot of people just don't know about, or it's just not in their sphere of routine, because a lot of people get up, they go to work, they come home, they spend time with
Hmm.
family, and then they rinse and repeat the same thing again and again. And then when there's an
Hmm.
interruption in our process or in our routine, we get to experience something different. And usually when there's an interruption, it's called vacation. and and most of us like that. But, I know in my situation, in my life, one time I got called for jury duty. And for those of you who are from Chicago, you'll when I say 26 in California, you'll know what I mean.
Hmm.
So I had to be called in for jury duty, and I had to go to the courthouse on 26 in California, and I stepped into a completely different reality.
Yeah.
Being over at that courthouse, it was a completely different level of reality that I was just not accustomed to. And so you have created this character that has a completely different reality. And I want you to talk about, what was the inspiration for that to create, this particular person?
Well, as I mentioned, I think I've been on this spiritual journey that, probably a lot longer than I would want to give credit to. But I've been an avid reader of many things. I've read the Tao Te Ching. It talks about the yin and the yang. I've read, of course, the Bible. I've read the Zohar. So many different spiritual texts, and everything still comes back with this duality.
Mm-hmm.
There's a duality that exists that permeates throughout the universe. I mean, if we go from the ultimate, which is supposed to be the other end of the spectrum, which is supposed to be the devil, to the just the good and the bad. You can't have light without darkness. You can't have good without evil. You can't have anything that exists without an opposite existing at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can't
So,
have life without suffering, because
right, that's so true.
some,
Life without death.
yeah, life without death.
We
Yeah.
wouldn't know life. We wouldn't know life until, existed if we didn't have death.
Hmm.
And it's just the duality. These things must exist. If you have one thing, you have to have a polar opposite. So, and being a Chicago police officer, I started to see so much, some of the things that you would just really cringe in real life. Real life is really unbelievable what
Hmm.
you see out on some of these streets, and you just can't believe it. and you're wondering, how could this be, or why did this person engage in such a heinous, activity or a crime? So that was pretty much my inspiration when I started writing the book, as well as my daughter, trying to give her something that would keep her attention, and it did, thankfully. But that's where the characters were birthed, and that's how the story got started, and and that's where we are now.
Let me ask you this question. This is a writer's question, and this comes up a lot with writers. Sometimes writing can be a outlet for a release of stuff, to get stuff out of your head or out of your mind. And so when you were talking about the stuff that you see on the streets, it made me think of this question. Like, did you find that this was almost a bit therapeutic to a certain degree, to just get some of this stuff out, or was that not it? Go ahead.
Yeah, so it was therapeutic for me. About it, 90 or maybe even 95% of the things you hear on the news, the outcomes are always bad. It doesn't end in a good way. So when you're writing, you have the choice. Even though some things may happen that are heinous and terrible, that at the very end, you can make something happen that's good for people. At least you can. You have that choice. In life, we really don't have that choice. Many of these crimes can still be unsolved, or, at the end result is that the victim died, and there's just no happiness. Bad is always winning. And so when you're writing, or at least for me, when I'm writing, I have the opportunity to change the outcomes, give people more sense of hope, give people the idea that they can be, because inside of us, like I said, is a duality. You can choose to be that person who decides that everything is bad and I'm going to be bad, or you can decide to be that person who's good or great and do things to help and benefit other people. Because, we're all a product of our thoughts. I think many people really believe that they're actually creating their own thoughts. But really, we're just a receiver. We're just viewing the thoughts. For example, if you take some time to just sit back in quiet reflection, and then you try to think about something that you're trying to work on or something that you need to do, maybe 5 minutes or so will go by, and then you're thinking about something else. But you were trying to think about the things that you need to do. Your mind automatically just takes over and goes on its own track. And it's giving you thought after thought after thought. And people, oftentimes make the decision to act on these thoughts, but you're not creating these thoughts. You're just receiving them and deciding whether or not you want to follow those thoughts or act upon those thoughts. And then you may even work hard to go back to thinking about what you were trying to think about. And that may last for a little while. But you're really only a receptor for your thoughts.
Yeah,
so,
and a lot of your thoughts are based on your conditioning and what you've grown up in and that sort of thing. And so that's why it's important for people to do introspective work on themselves, so that they can pay attention to those thoughts and examine them. And you're not going to stop thoughts from coming to your head. What you can stop is how you process them, and those sorts of things. But
absolutely.
A lot of people don't understand that part of human development and consciousness, and what it means. Because I like to say that there or even psychologists say that at any given point you can be a different version of yourself, or a multiple version of yourself. Because I can tell you, at 17,
right,
I was a completely different version of myself than I am now. What I would have done at 17 does not add up to what I'm going to do in middle age. and I'm quite sure at this point, when I'm in my 70s or 80s, I'm going to be looking at things a whole lot differently than I am now at middle age.
That's so true.
So it's like you said.
True.
It's like you said. As you mentioned a couple of times. It's a spiritual journey where we're human beings having a spirit. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And so
That's it.
that is it right there in a nutshell. Now let me ask you this question. This is going to be another writer's question. Do you have
Mhm.
a book that you just absolutely love to read, or an author that you just really like their writing style, that you just follow them, you study them, you've said this particular writer really speaks to me?
Well, it's funny because my protagonist, I would say I felt I got maybe some of his characteristics from like James Patterson's Alex Cross. I liked
Mm.
the character. I liked the way he wrote him. Now maybe the movies didn't do him so much justice, and depending on who was playing the character, but I like a lot of James
Yeah.
Patterson.
I've met him
And
several times. The author, James Patterson. I've met
oh,
him.
that
Yeah, he
that
comes to book
that is
signings.
fantastic.
He came to a couple of book signings wearing red hats and just a cap, and I'm like, do you know who you are? You're Mr. Alex Cross, and so yeah, I'm an Alex Cross fan as well, and I'm also a Walter Mosley fan who writes the Easy Rollins series.
Okay.
But anyway, I didn't mean to
Oh
interrupt.
yeah.
Yeah, Easy Rollins. Denzel Washington played
Mhm.
the 40s
Absolutely.
detective. So I like that that character, and I like
Mhm.
James Patterson's Alex Cross. I think Morgan Freeman used to play Alex Cross before Tyler Perry.
He did.
Yeah, I
He
think
did.
Morgan
And he
Freeman
did
was.
an he did an excellent job.
Yeah,
He did a pretty good job.
he did a pretty good
Yeah.
job. So you're an Alex Cross, James Patterson kind of person that you like, the mysteries and that sort of thing. That's awesome. Is there any
Yeah.
other? Are there any other writers or mystery writers that out there that you can think of that you just say I really like this person's style?
Well, because my book, and just to be fair, it's more of a supernatural crime thriller.
Hmm.
Uh, so with that being said, it's kind of a cross. So if I had to think about any of the other writers, we'd have to go with the most infamous, and that's Stephen King. So I
Ooh.
tell a lot of people my book is like an Alex or James Patterson meets Stephen King.
Now that's some scary stuff there,
So
because because you look at Stephen King, you're like, what is going on in that man's head that he could come up with
yeah,
this
yeah.
stuff?
So I like to let readers know, ahead of time that okay, it's a supernatural crime thriller. So some people, just either you have the taste for it, or some people they're just afraid of that, or they're scared of that, and they don't want to indulge. So I don't want to, give anybody, nightmares at night. But
But something
if you like that,
then
right?
you
If you
go with
like
it.
that,
Then do
right?
it.
This is
Yeah,
this is the book.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
even with that being said, even Stephen King has penned some of that supernatural stuff. And I want to say the movie, I think it's
Hmm.
Christine, the one with the car that was possessed.
Right. Right.
Right, right.
Absolutely. I
So
remember that.
yeah,
1980 or so.
yeah, yeah. He was writing stuff. He was writing stuff about, or I don't think he was the one that did the dolls with Chucky the doll coming to life. I don't think that, but
No.
there
No.
is a lot of that type of stuff out there,
Hmm.
and it also reminds me, since you say crime thriller, supernatural stuff. One of my guilty pleasures is watching old time television and watching old episodes of like The Outer Limits and One Step Beyond and The Twilight
Man,
Zone.
Twilight Zone. Yep. So am I. My wife goes crazy. Like, oh, not again. But I don't know. I think it's fodder for a lot of things that I'm thinking about, or a lot of things I want to write about. So yeah, I'm captivated by the old black and whites. Anything that's old and black and white, you never know. And I'm just drawn to that. So I guess I'm a product of that era.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
that's
always
where my
wanted.
writing comes from.
Yeah, I've always wanted to write in that genre, but I could just never find the chops to like have somebody that was so ordinary experience something that was so extraordinary. And I think about one episode where it's
Right.
called The Salesman, where this guy's daughter is
Mhm.
is is about to die and death comes, and the guy says, I have to give the sales pitch
Mhm.
of my life in order to keep the devil, or keep the, or not the devil, keep death from
Right.
taking, my daughter. And I was like,
Uh
wow, what a moment that is, to have that sort of supernatural kind of stuff interfere in something
mhm.
that is very human that happens in your life. I think that's a cool thing.
Right.
And so let me ask you this question. So this is your first book, correct?
That is correct.
That is that. What was it like for you to actually commit to sitting down and writing the book? Because there are so many writers out there who want to write, but they can't seem they'll make up an excuse. Oh, I can't find the time. Oh, I every time I write something, I think it's horrible. I throw it out. What was that moment for you when you actually sat down and committed to sitting at a computer to write? Because writing is an alone event. There is no cast of people around you supporting you. I mean, this is you
Mhm.
giving birth to your thoughts and spending a lot of time doing it.
Well, I can tell you, you're absolutely right. It's an alone event, and right how imperative it is to be somewhere where it's quiet and you just don't have the distractions. And my household has been big. It's my wife, and we've had 6 children. I mean, a lot of my three oldest are not really in the house anymore, but it's been tough trying to have quiet time to write. So when I finally committed, I'm gonna tell you, I had to go to the library
Mm.
virtually every day. I
Mm-hmm.
went to the library every day early in the morning. I was there many times before the library opened. I would just be there waiting on them to come and unlock the doors, and they would be like, okay, we're here. Come on in. And I was in there writing the first part of the morning and early afternoon because I worked afternoons. And so I would leave there, rush, go get into my uniform, go to work, and I do the same thing the next day. So when I committed to doing that, it was interesting because, I felt tired, and, you're changing things as you write, you're constantly editing, but I felt good actually. It was something that once I actually made the decision to get that book done, nothing could stop me. And that's the whole point. Once you have to make the decision. I've told many of my friends, because I have many friends that keep asking me, I got this book I want to write and this and that. Would you write it for me? I've had people ask me, would I write the book for them? I said, well, you really have to be your own voice. I mean, I can help you as much as I can with the time I have, because I'm still, working on trying to crank out the next book. But you have to make a decision. The things that you have going on, you want to sit down, you want to write it out, if you want to outline it, but you're gonna edit it anyway. But the point is, you got to start getting it down. You got to start getting it on paper, and it's hard for people to commit unless they just make the decision. Once you decide, nothing really can stop you, but you have to make the decision. So for me, once I, decided that I'm going to leave my house every morning, I didn't care, rain, shine, whatever was going on, I was standing in front of the library. That was the place I had to write
Yeah.
every morning before the library opened.
Yeah, and that is some true commitment, there to do that, to go and make that decision to sit in the space, sit with your characters, and have that moment, and then to, as you say, to create to go into a space that exudes writing. So like you, I would often go to the library to write as well, because it was just like being
Hmm.
around books and, all these books on the shelves and all these
Right,
people coming in to read. I said, I'm in the right space for what I'm doing, because I want my stuff to be up on that shelf. I want somebody to come in one day and look
right.
at my labor of love and say, wow, this looks like it's, going to be a good read. Let me ask you this. What was it like for
Right.
you when you finally went and got that book printed and it arrived at your doorstep? Your copies arrived at your doorstep. What was that like for you?
really even put that into words. It was just so, it was complete. To finally have the copy, the printed version complete in my hand was just, man, it was something I can't even explain. So, of course, we went out, we had, the book signings, and we were trying to get the book out to everybody that we knew. And I just can't tell you. And of course, the shock of so many people, because, everybody that knows you, like, what, you wrote a book? Nobody can ever believe that you can write a book, because it just seems so incomprehensible or such a daunting task for many people. But you'd be surprised if you, like I said, if you commit, if you make the decision to write the book, you can get it done. So, yeah, it was one of the best feelings I probably ever had in my life. Yeah, it was something.
Every time I got one of my books back, in the printed version, I slept with them. So people, because sometimes, I've gotten reviews on my book, or I'm at a signing or something, and people say, "Which character are you? And did you sleep with any of them?" And I say, "Yeah, I slept with them all." and so with that being said, what was it like for you to receive reviews from complete strangers about your work?
Man, it was great, because I haven't had a negative so far. Everyone who's read my book, who's taken the time to call or leave a message about how great they thought the book was, it was phenomenal. And then, of course, I have so many people ask the next one.
Oh, yeah. And then it's going to be the next, and the next.
I'm in awe. I'm in awe.
So what we're going to do,
in awe,
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I get that a lot too. When's the next one? I'm like, I just finished this one. Or even worse, once you have so many books, then people circle back and read your other book and says, "Oh, this character here," and you're like, "Wait, what was the name of that story? Did I write that?" Because I'm so many books away from it, I forgot.
Right.
So with that being said,
I can see that happening.
Yes. So with that being said, let us take a moment to hear an excerpt from your book, "The Blood-Dimmed Tide is Loosed." And before we do that, I want you to, set us up here with the scene that's about to be performed.
Pretty much we have our antagonist. He is a trash collector. I believe this scene now is him. A little previous information is that he's got these clients that he likes to visit on a regular basis. And this happens to be one that he's going to see this particular night, but she's done something to him to change his fondness about her.
Ooh.
And he's very upset. So you'll have to just keep that in mind, that she's done something to him, and now he kind of wants to get back at her.
Okay, and now
that's it.
Okay, and now we're going to hear an excerpt from "The Blood-Dimmed Tide is Loosed."
The Blood-Dimmed Tide is Loosed, a novel by Dre Tillery. When evening came, Stan decided to take a ride. This was something he did often to escape the drabness and loneliness of his life. But the reality was, he never had anywhere to go or anyone to see. He had often been invited to Cedric's place on different special occasions like birthdays and holidays, but he knew he wouldn't fit in with Cedric's family and friends because he never had much to say, so he always declined. And there was no one else around in his life that cared enough to invite him to anything, so he often visited people he knew from work, his clients, so to speak. Stan had 2 or 3 people he liked to visit regularly from each route, but none of these clients ever knew this, nor that they even suspect that he was there. In fact, none of his clients even knew him at all, but yet he still visited them often, one by one, watching them from a distance. And all of them, by no mere coincidence, were women. Stan began to drive, turning corner after corner as if he was still trying to decide where he was going to. He knew he had several customers to choose from, and it had become difficult for him to pick one over the other for his nightly visits on many nights. And, although he hadn't admitted it to himself yet, deep down, Stan already knew exactly where he was going and who he was going to see this particular night. He turned down street after street, as if he were randomly selecting each direction that he was traveling. But with each turn of a corner, each long, dark street was leading him closer and closer to a particular house, Marilyn's house. As he reached the 9700 block of South Damon Avenue, he began to slow down before reaching the house. He wanted to be able to get a good look. A slow, creeping pass by the front of the house should give him just the look he wanted. And just as Stan had anticipated, when he reached the front of her house, he could see directly into the living room. Because she had left her blinds open.
Welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed that excerpt from the book The Blood-Dimmed Tide is Loose by Dre Till. Dre, that was an intense scene. I mean, you know, when I performed that for you, I was like all in my head with the visuals on this man. And I thought about how many times I've left my own blinds opened and wondered if anybody had just pulled up and just watched. Not that they would see anything, but it's just one of those things. You don't think, once you're in your space, once you're in your house and you think you're in your safe space, you don't necessarily think about what's going on outside of it. And so this particular character was so unique and, I don't want to say slick, but sneaky, because he says they don't even know. I mean, he has a whole different story going on inside of his head. Says they don't even know that they're my clients. I'm like, damn.
Right.
So it's like he is I imagine that he's going to be a character that you love to hate. I mean, it sounds like he's such a good character he's such a good villain that you like. Ooh, here he comes again. It's like almost hearing the Jaws theme when he comes, dun 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 dun.
Right.
He's like, or Darth Vader when he walks in the room. Shit, here comes Vader again. Dun 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 dun.
Right.
That sort of thing. So, Dre, let me ask you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so let me ask you another question for you. You mentioned earlier, that you went to the library to write. Can you give us a sense of how many hours did you sit there and write? Was there anything? Did you eat something before you start to write? Did you have to do a mantra? Did you have to do a Hopi Indian chant before you started writing? Because there's so many people who go to sit down to write and they go, I have nothing. My mind just goes blank. What's your process like to keep your brain from going blank?
Well, interestingly enough, when I tried writing in the evenings after work, my mind was shot. You've been out, you've been working, you've dealt with so many different things throughout the course of the day that, your creative sense was lacking, at least for me. So I knew that, the early morning, and there's a reason why they say the early bird catches the worm. You have to get up and have that stillness, that quiet time to be able to actually receive the creations that are coming to you. So a typical writing day for me, I've learned not to eat breakfast, because when I eat breakfast and then I go and I sit in the laptop and I start, eventually the mind starts to drift, and even that itis starts to to slip in again, even though, I might have been up a couple of hours and I'm getting sleepy again because now my food is trying to digest.
Right.
So for me, no, it was a cup of coffee and, off to the library, and I would write. And I may sit there until half an hour before it's time for me to go to work, and which was typically 3:00. So it was kind of tough on certain days, but I may not eat until the end of the day. I'm not encouraging anybody to do that. I mean, because you need to eat. But for me, I sit there and I wouldn't even notice how many hours had gone by.
Yeah.
I would just be into the story.
That would be me too. I could sit and write for hours and hours and hours because I would have that flow. I would get into that zone. I would get into that space where it's like it's coming, and it's like I'm channeling, and it's like I'm giving birth here. My fingers are moving fast. My mind is moving faster than my fingers can type, because I'm seeing the scene all in my mind. Which brings me next to the next question, which is a question about emotions when you write. Because what a lot of maybe new writers may not understand, writing is also a very emotional event. Especially when you have to write a difficult scene or even a sexy scene, depending on what it is.
That's so true.
and so I know for me, I wrote this thriller suspense novel called Have Mercy, and it's a crime fiction novel, and I had to write a scene where this state trooper who was out riding on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago has this driver lose control and come across the landscape and hit his daughter on the bicycle path. And the father has to,
my goodness,
and has to go and, deal with this particular scene. And for me, that was such an emotionally draining scene because I had to get into this character. I mean, I really had to get into him and really feel these emotions that would come up. And what would happen, and so I wanted, and so even with writing that for me, it was like I was exhausted after that scene, and so so have you ever had that experience where the emotions, you were writing something and you just had to step away from it or you had to do something because you just felt the energy of it going through you?
Well, if you really think about it, how can anyone else experience the emotions of your book or, a movie or any other artistic medium if you don't experience it while you're producing it or creating it? So, for me, when I'm, my character is doing certain things, I mean, I'm feeling the pain. We're all connected like that anyway. Because if you see something on TV or in a movie and somebody gets hurt a certain way, we all cringe or we all feel like, oh my God, or you kind of feel it. I mean, we're empathetic in that sense because we are really all connected. It's a total stranger, but you don't want to see that type of hurt or harm or that sense of loss for someone who's on TV because their child was kidnapped or whatever or found. So, when I was writing, you can't help but feel the emotions of the situation. So, and you want to make sure that you're conveying it because, and the stronger you're able to convey it, the more you're going to feel it as well. So, absolutely, I was going back and forth. I was torn. I was sad. and and these are just characters, but you have to be in the moment. You have to make the person see and believe what's happening, that this is going on. And if you're not able to feel it yourself, then you're not really conveying it. You're not giving them the visual. You're not putting them in that place in the story, because everybody wants to be have a ringside seat. They want to sit there and see everything as it's being played out.
So yeah, I know for me, to feel that and to experience that, um, is very important to the writing, but also, as you said, I want the reader to, experience this the way that I experience it. Because, when you sit down with a book, when a reader sits down with a book or a story or something like that, you're asking to take up, as a writer or the creator, you're asking to take up mental space in their brain. You're asking for that. You're asking permission to allow me to come into your brain and take up, neurological space so that you don't forget me or forget this story.
True.
And as a creator, I want to make sure that I give you the best possible experience that I can, so that you remember this. I mean, just like you were talking about how you came up with the title, you read a poem. For some reason, those particular words stood out in your brain, and you just couldn't shake them. And you said you kept coming back to it. You kept coming back to it. So that's the beauty of the written word and language and storytelling, and those sorts of things, is it has the power to stick with you. So for young writers or new writers or beginning writers, we have to take that into consideration, that we have to produce a product that the end user that we have in mind is going to enjoy it, and not read 3 chapters or 4 chapters and say, okay, I can't get through it. You want the people to keep turning the page. And so for your book, do you have is there a particular secret or formula that you have that you use to keep a reader turning the pages? In other words, when a reader's sitting at home at night and they got to go, okay, one more chapter, and it's 2:00 in the morning, and they have to go to work the next day, and they're going, okay, one more chapter, because you're giving them literary crack, and they're like, okay, one more page. Oh my God, it's 4:00 in the morning, and I'm still reading the same thing. I can't get it out of my head. Is there a process or a formula that you use to get to that level?
Well, I about things that would keep my attention. And so for me, it is giving me something visually compelling and tense. Anytime there's some tension where you're just, oh my God, what's going to happen next? That just keeps me fastened to the book. So I wanted to give my readers as much tension, to always want to know what's coming up next. What is this guy about to do? That in itself, to me, warrants people to want to, continue to read the book. And luckily, so far, many of my readers have told me that, oh my goodness. And once I started reading, I couldn't put the book down.
Yeah.
I just had to finish it. And I was there. Hear that.
yeah, and as a creator, that's what you want. That's your real payment. Monetary is nice, but your real payment is that it has resonated with the reader in some way. That's the real payment. That's the real payment. Well, Dre, we are coming up to the end of the show, but you know what? I've had a wonderful time speaking with you, but, give us some information on where folks can download your book. How can they reach out to you? Where can they follow you? Give us all of that information.
Well, available on Amazon. It's you can purchase it. Like I said, go on Amazon. You can go to my website, www.dretil.com. You can also pick up your copies there. And, follow me on Twitter, and just look me up, or you can just send out a message to me and, through my website. And I hope that you guys pick up a copy. And if you really like the book, if you leave a leave a message saying that hey, it was good, or if you didn't like it, let me know why, so I can make sure I'm trying to do things to correct my next books in the series. So I look forward to everyone's feedback.
Okay, and this is a series that you're writing.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, can you give us a hint of when you're going to have the next one out? I know people ask you that all the time.
Yes, they are. Well, I'm trying. I'm really aiming for spring of 2020. I'm pretty sure it'll be spring of 2020. But worst case scenario, summer. You know.
Okay. So, all right. So I won't press you on that because I know probably after this you're heading to the library. Well, Dre.
You know it.
Yeah. Dre, thank you for taking the time to be with us here on A Reader's Paradise. And again, if you love hearing interviews like this and you love hearing literature performed for you, please leave us a 5-star rating and also leave us a comment in the podcast. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts on places such as iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, and Podbean.